down every single game on the slate. We got buys everywhere across the league, tough lineup decisions to make, injuries, so much to get to. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 7. John McKechnie and Mario Puig hanging out with you on this Thursday, getting you ready for this week. And, you know, Mario, we've kind of had this one circled going back to when the schedule was released, and, you know, with all of our combined hundreds of best ball drafts over the summer, we knew that Week 7 was probably going to be a problem for us. And it is from the buys alone. And now we have injuries everywhere across the league in key spots. So, I mean, that makes – we're going to be rolling out some stinky looking lineups this week, are we not?
I honestly had forgotten and stopped paying attention to whatever point this was previously significant, whatever was previously significant about it, because I sort of just, I had so many J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubb rosters that whatever problem Week 7 might have been for me otherwise was kind of like, well, who cares now? But I definitely feel a general stress every week for my life. It applies to this week too, but I've also been in that kind of just like roach survival, post-nuclear annihilation roach survival mode. And I've
get yourself to the Twinkie factory for sustenance.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I in a more like composed state, I might have been like, trouble afoot in week 7, but I've kind of just felt like I've lived it long enough. I didn't really notice.
Yeah, you guys must be new here, because we had Dobbins and Chubb go down for the season in weeks 1 and 2 respectively. So we've been here. We've been in the mud for a little while now, scraping together some running back pickups, none of which seem to really be working out. And then Craig Reynolds is banged up now, and it's like, oh, I thought he had this golden opportunity. We'll obviously get to that Lions game a little later on in the show. But I want to get things started, speaking of injuries, on the Thursday night game, because we have a pretty central figure to this game whose status is up in the air. Of course, I'm talking about one Trevor Lawrence, hurt his knee in Sunday's win over Indianapolis. They, according to Adam Schefter, last I saw, they're not going to make a call on him until he gets a workout in pregame. So really, if you're dependent on Lawrence in your league, especially in a 2 QB league, again, with all the buys and Justin Fields being hurt, this is a very, very significant lineup move for people to be making on their Thursday night. So my kind of sense is that Trevor Lawrence is going to play, but you wonder, how limited is he going to be? How does the Jaguars offense kind of restructure on the fly to accommodate for the fact that Lawrence probably isn't going to be able to move around as well as he normally does? So that all kind of leads to the Saints being 2-point favorites in this one, which is a little bit, it's like a full point different than it was a couple of days ago in the Saints direction. So that to me is an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah, so I had probably higher hopes for this year in both teams' cases than what has come true in either case. And I, with that said, probably would have favored the Jaguars pretty easily, especially like at the preseason. Before I saw Sherwood press Taylor, to me, he's Sherwood. Before I saw him as a play caller, I thought this Jags offense was going to be a lot better than it has proven to be. And with the Sherwood factor, with Brandon Scherf, it seems like he's going to play, but he only had one limited practice all week. Walker Little's out, so I don't even know who the guards are for the Jaguars at the moment. I doubt it's something good. And I'm concerned that this would have been a difficult spot for the Jaguars offense, even if they were fully healthy, just because the Saints defense is pretty good. And I think the Saints defensive personnel might give the Jaguars some trouble, especially given what I would call kind of like static play calling and sort of predictable play calling from Press Taylor. I worry about the Jaguars playing on like kind of a small field, most offensive snaps, like kind of constricting themselves playing into the hands of the Saints. And that's a really bad thing to do, especially probably against a bigger defenses like the Saints are. Like they got like Carl Granderson is the wait, no, did I say the name of the Mets guy or the actual Saints guy?
Curtis Granderson played for every team, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so it is Carl Granderson. I always mix those two up. Carl Granderson is like the small Saints lineman, and he's over 260, so he is smallish. But the other ones are like Cam Jordan. He's pushing like 290, and even though he's like a 12 sack threat every year, he's as big as a lot of defensive tackles on the end. They give about 20 to 25 snaps per game to that pass and yo guy. I still don't know what exactly he does, but he's huge. So if you're playing on a small field as a matter of like offensive choice, and then you go against kind of a defense that maybe gives up a little bit of speed for bulk in the first place, it just seems to me like kind of a really claustrophobic kind of scenario where things could get a little wacky. So particularly since Lawrence is so questionable, like so close to the wrong side of questionable, I almost would rather just see Beathard play this game, and I don't want to see Trevor Lawrence get hurt just so the Jaguars can lose anyway. If they're going to lose with Beathard, I would go almost as far as say they were going to lose with 75% Trevor Lawrence anyway in this particular matchup. So yeah, who knows where that goes. Beathard obviously is not good. He is a little bit toolsy. He's got like bootleg athleticism, and he's got a pretty strong arm, but apparently he's got nothing else going for him. But it's just a tough matchup. And on the other side too is like the Saints offensive line is generally obliterated, and then they're also doing a bunch of shuffling of the personnel, which is almost never a good idea. You don't want to introduce turnover to an offensive line, especially when it's a bunch of just like Cameron Irving. Like they pick up him to play right tackle. This could be a really ugly. Both defenses could score more than their own offenses.
All right, so now I've got both defenses on my showdown lineup radar.
Those days,
it really might be. And then tacking on, is there anyone that's sort of like borderline, like on the fence of whether you're starting or sitting them on the Jags side if Lawrence is out? Like, would you sit a guy like Evan Ingram? Would you sit a guy like Christian Kirk? Or would it just kind of lower your projection for them?
A big detail to watch, especially as it relates to Ingram, is the status of Demario Davis, who did not practice at all this week. It sounds like he's going to kind of try to Iron Man it anyway. We'll see. I mean, that guy's almost 35. He's still awesome. I don't even understand how he's been so good at his age, but it's like he's almost 35. 35-year-old linebackers playing without practice, I'm guessing, is kind of like a dubious categorical thing. Like I doubt there's been many like, oh, that worked out great cases of that. So even if Davis plays and he is not himself, that could get Ingram kind of free from what would otherwise be a nightmare matchup. Otherwise, it is pretty close to a nightmare matchup because I think it's accurate to say that Davis and the Saints haven't given up a whole lot to tight ends in a while. But tight end is such a low bar. I wouldn't really bench Ingram unless I don't even know who I'd have in mind. I certainly wouldn't bench him for like a Conklin type, I do like
is Pat Freiermuth the line there?
That one's so tough too because I just think generally highly of Freiermuth, even though in fantasy he's been a nightmare. I'd probably stick with Ingram between the two.
Okay,
but
all right.
I'd probably leave in Ridley, and I'd also probably leave in Kirk. Kirk is the one who has the easiest matchup of the receivers. It might still be difficult relatively, but he against like Alontae Taylor doesn't seem like he's that much of a slot natural corner, but they've been playing him there anyway. So we'll see if Kirk can get the better of him.
All right. And then on the Saints side, we saw some news come across this morning of note that Jamal Williams is going to be activated off of injured reserve. So based on the Kamara suspension and the timing of Jamal Williams' injury, we haven't had to really answer the question of who's the guy. I think we know that it's Kamara, but just how much is Williams going to be the proverbial thorn in his side? And obviously for the Kamara fantasy managers out there, Kamara has not been overly efficient thus far, but he's really gotten a ton of work. But do you see this instance being something where Jamal Williams takes some work off of his plate, but we see Kamara make up for it with a boost in his efficiency? Or is this something where Kamara's touches go down, and he's still like a 3.8 yards per carry, 3.5 yards per catch guy.
This is a tough one for me, John, because I'm not the most impartial Jamal Williams observer. Like I just happen to believe he's quite bad. Of course, I had a bit of a skirmish with his mother on Twitter back in the day. So I've always had
in the pre-draft process.
The Williams family has been kind of like an enemy of mine for a long time, and no, I'm just joking. She's I'm sure a nice lady, but she was going around owning people who in my case, I didn't know how old he was. I thought he was a year older than he was, and she told me I was a fraud, and she was right. I was the one who was factually wrong on it.
Most of these BYU guys are 30 years old. It's not your fault.
Yeah, he literally enrolled there. He was 17 his freshman year. It was very strange. So yeah, they got a bunch of like 27-year-olds and then 17-year-old Jamal Williams on the team. Anyway, I happen to think Jamal Williams is pretty much awful from scrimmage. If he does something useful, then I guess it's that he is a good blocker, blitz pickup or something like that. I feel like a team could do a lot better pretty easily. So the question of what the Saints should do, in my opinion, is basically give Williams almost nothing, or whatever they do give him be not a single play, not a single touch more than what they were budgeting for Kendre Miller. And as I see it, I mean, Kendre Miller may well be worse in pass protection. I have no idea. I guess he probably is, being an underclassman rookie. But from scrimmage, there's no question that Kendre Miller is better than Jamal. It's a low bar. You don't have to be very good from scrimmage to easily be better than Jamal Williams from scrimmage. So if the Saints want to give him something, going back to what they should do again, it should be give him maybe some of those Kamara carries that are very low expectation, low utility carries. Like if you're running on if it's 2nd and 1 and you're running the ball, maybe give Jamal Williams that carry. If he can get a yard, I'll give him that. But if you need 4 yards, don't give Jamal Williams the ball. That's a bad idea. It always has been, and it's not getting any better now that he's kind of racking up some mileage and age. So I think that Kamara on the should question would be fine. There is, I guess, some risk of the Saints deciding like, oh, but we got to get our money's worth out of Williams. Let's put him out there for 30 snaps. And if they do that, they won't like the results.
So this introduces an annoying, but it's just like hard to trust Pete Carmichael and this Saints like offensive scheme. So like I feel like despite your factual points on Jamal Williams and his utility, I feel like we're still going to see more than we would like. Yeah,
I mean it is totally possible. It's just that much more reason to pick both defenses in showdown.
There it is. And then on the Kamara angle, I did see that his total yardage prop sitting at 83.5. Do you have a side there?
Man, I'm trying to think of how many carries and catches he'd need to even get there. And it's like 18 carries and 3 catches.
Right.
And I don't know, man. He'd need a long run, I don't think he's going to grind out that kind of yardage. The Jags defense seems like it's taken a step forward. I don't know if it was like the what is it, Mike called. I always mix up the defensive coordinator for the Jags and their old GM who was awful. But the defensive coordinator seems pretty good. I'm going to just hope his name is Mike Caldwell. He maybe has a pretty ambitious defensive scheme that kind of like took them a year or more to really get the rhythm down. And maybe the Jags defense being so good this year is because they've kind of really got it down pat. But yeah, I think I don't know. I'd take the under on Kamara because it does seem like the Jags defense is at another level right now than they were. And if I had previously been assuming the Jags would continue to be bad on the personnel basis, but it seems like they've kind of turned a corner, and I have to kind of like readjust my sort of like assumed baseline of that defense. And I don't know if, particularly with the Saints offensive line annihilated, I don't know if I can bank on Kamara getting there.
Yeah, I can't either. So when I saw that number, I thought that the under would be the play.
I like the under.
I'm not even like frustrated with Kamara from a fantasy perspective so far this season, just because he's been getting so much work since coming back from the suspension. But you'd have to be really looking through it through black and gold glasses to say that he's looked particularly good. He's just, for fantasy reasons, he's been, someone that gets a ton of volume, but still not overly explosive with those opportunities. Let's hit a quick trade question from our guy Greg, and then get on over to Sunday. Greg is he's off to a rough start this year. He's 0-6, so we got to help him out. Would you trade away CeeDee Lamb and Brian Robinson for Kenneth Walker and George Pickens?
That's tough. I kind of am. Let me do, John. Let me do the stupid reflexive answer before I think about it too much. Yes.
Very good.
Where were you leaning?
Yes, as well, because
okay.
I'm totally eating my words on Kenneth Walker. I'm getting very disillusioned with all the Zach Charbonnet that I have. Not that my stance on Charbonnet is any different as a talent, but Kenneth Walker's like clearly the guy in Seattle, and he's running extremely well.
Yeah, I do think that Walker, is doing a good job, but I think I'm a little concerned about Charbonnet at some point. My issue here is I don't expect Brian Robinson to hold on to the job as the year goes along, and I don't know if we can bank on CeeDee Lamb being the player that we thought he would be going into this year, the player that he was last year, or, all the years really before this. I'm worried that Dallas only will look good against against really bad teams with like major talent disadvantages to them. And I'm worried we're not going to get what we should have gotten with Lamb, which to me, he's still well ahead of Pickens for me, but the distance between Robinson and Walker for me is much greater than whatever distance is between Lamb and Pickens for me.
Yeah, I think you're getting the best fantasy asset in this trade by getting Kenneth Walker, because I am dubious on CeeDee Lamb the rest of the way with
all the coaches' fault.
Yeah, no, completely. It's not a talent thing with Lamb, obviously, but we got to factor in what's going on in the real world, and yeah, it's not been super pretty when it comes to that Cowboys offense. Even when they scored 40 points, a lot of it was defense and special teams. So I think, Greg, if I'm you, press yes.
Might as well shake it up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Bad locker room vibes. Got to get a fresh reset there. Before we get on over to the Sunday games, we got a message from our friends over at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Bowl Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the Big Game Bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. That's several million more pixels than what I have on my TV here at the condo. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. Again, that's circalasvegas.com. We also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. Then we're on to Sunday. Lions, Ravens. Lions going into Charm City as 3-point underdogs. A little bit surprised on that one. The Ravens coming off the win in London. No bye week for them. Theirs is much later in the season. I believe it's week 13. So we saw the Jaguars be able to manage well coming back from London. Buffalo less so last week. But are you surprised by the line here?
Yeah, I still don't think the Lions are very good, but they have to be something like a top, 8 team. And even if the league is so awful this year, and even if it's the main reason why, they still are up there, and the Ravens still are not clearly there to me. Maybe injuries are something of an excuse, but I just I don't have that much faith in the Ravens defense, not nearly as much as I have been accustomed to, my life of knowing who the Ravens are and always being able to bank on really good defense. It's just kind of not really there anymore, especially when you look at a case like the Lions offense. And, I certainly was wrong about Goff against the Buccaneers last week. I thought the Buccaneers had the personnel, Bowles, sometimes a good game planner. I thought they would have enough to give Jared Goff one of his customary road game outcomes. But I was certainly wrong about that. But if you watch that game, Goff didn't have to make any high difficulty. He had a couple good throws. Funny, one of his best throws was actually dropped by Laporta early in the game. And that's one of like 2 or 3 throws of that quality that Goff ever makes. And the rest of the time, Bowles in the Buccaneers defense just got pants. Like Ben Johnson just had them in the sharpshooter right away. And when you watch Goff play, it's a lot like watching Brock Purdy play a lot of the time, where it's just these guys get to play on a lower difficulty level than other quarterbacks. And that's a structural explanation for it, but the structure exists, and it goes forward into the matchups. And if you're the Ravens, you can't really touch Jared Goff necessarily. So how are you going to get him out of that T-ball situation that he's been playing all year? Their offensive line is ready to hold up at the point of attack. They don't have a great corner. They don't have great secondary personnel in general. So I don't see where the Ravens get to express an advantage other than just the home field, whatever it amounts to. And short of bad weather, I just don't know whether that matters either, because it's like normally passing games suffer. Normally Jared Goff passing production would suffer going outside like this for reasons of just kind of like, wind, rain, gravity, all that. And that doesn't really come up when you're talking the sort of really structured play action looks where it's just like he basically has to look at 2 or 3 spots all in a very comfortable kind of like flow chart progression from an offensive line that's giving him 5 yards of space in every direction. That's a scenario where any quarterback can play even in outdoors conditions, even if they're not that good outdoors relative to in a dome setting. So I think if a team like Tampa Bay at home can't do anything to Goff, then I don't see why the Ravens would be able to either. And the Ravens offense, I mean, they're tough for me because I certainly still have high expectations for them, but it's been a little clunky. And the Lions defense is certainly well coached. I still think the Lions personnel is kind of trash in the secondary, but they're really well coached by Aaron Glenn. And as much as Ben Johnson gets a lot of hype, deservedly so, Aaron Glenn deserves a lot more credit than he gets too. That Detroit defense is overachieving constantly, and it's because of him. So the Ravens could get out coached on both sides. I kind of expect them to, and they don't have a clear personnel advantage other than Lamar Jackson. And as we've seen, John, quarterbacks don't matter. What matters is the structure of the rest of the team. That is not actually that's not a joke that I'm saying. It's actually true. So yeah, I still doubt the Lions in terms of like them as like a playoff team, but it seems to me that it's Lamar Jackson versus the Lions.
Well, I guess I don't know. I might have a higher esteem for the Ravens defense this year. Maybe it'll be able to get home. Linebacker's good. Clowney's having a totally resurgent year. So that's been nice. Kind of an unexpected development there, but they still don't have an overly lively pass rush. I mean, Justin Madubuike seems like he's like the main guy that gets after the quarterback, and you can't really rely on that. Not against this Lions offensive line, but maybe they'll be able to. He was sick last week too.
I know, man. I don't know why he has bounced around the way he has. I don't know much about linebacker, and I don't pay much attention to him. But I feel like Kyle Van Noy is one of those guys who is always just like making some kind of ridiculous play that usually is annoying because he's usually with the Patriots and all that. But with the Ravens, I find him more likable.
Yeah, as do I. No question about that. But beyond that, for fantasy. What do you make of the Lions' backfield for this weekend with Dave Montgomery being out and them just kind of seemingly hating their first round pick?
Is he supposed to be playing? I missed the latest on Jahmyr Gibbs.
I'm guessing that he's in line, but I will have that firmed
limited
up
Wednesday. Okay, he should be in. I don't know what to make of like what percentage healthy he'll be. I am a little bit more pessimistic of Gibbs at this point than I certainly expected to be, but I worry that Ben Johnson, as good as he is, I don't think he actually has a structural accommodation in mind for Gibbs. Like, I don't know if he can do it. I don't know if you gave Johnson Alvin Kamara, I don't know if he would know how to use him the way Sean Payton did. I don't know if his like ideological inclinations cut aside that sort of function that you need to get Gibbs going, like Eckler or Kamara or whatever. So if Ben Johnson just doesn't know what a running back can do other than what David Montgomery and Jamal Williams types do, which is to say, I guess, just leverage that offensive line advantage with a power volume run game, then I don't know why he ever would like Gibbs. And I could actually imagine him preferring a bunch of other crap running backs instead, because it is it's not a low value return for the Lions, but it doesn't require much talent at running back from scrimmage to leverage that kind of offensive line, particularly if you're talking just dives and like slightly off tackle runs from under center and stuff. I don't know. I know that Craig Reynolds cannot play relative to Gibbs. I know that Gibbs is easily more talented than Reynolds or whoever else they might call up, but who are they? Who are even the alternatives? Like, I don't know who their practice squad running backs are.
Right, exactly, because Zonovan Knight's on injured reserve, and I think he might be done for the year.
He is, yeah. So, and I'm trying to pull up their practice squad section of their roster right now, and let's see. So they do not have. Okay, they have Mohammed Ibrahim. I don't know. Is he healthy even?
You never really know with him.
Oh my God. How do you have Divine Zigbo in 2023? Okay. Yeah. So if it's, I'll say this, even if Ben Johnson personally hates Jahmyr Gibbs and also doesn't like Jahmyr Gibbs as far as his football abilities go, Gibbs would still get the first, second, and third nod over Divine Zigbo if that's the alternative.
All right. So that's, not the sunniest of outlooks for their run
Maybe I
game,
should have picked the Ravens. I don't know. I still pick the Lions, I guess. But if they really can't use Gibbs here, they're just like going nowhere. They blew it. You can't screw up that pick. In addition to the way that it looks like they're screwing up the Williams pick.
I think you might even be able to argue that even if Gibbs gets volume here, this is a bad matchup for him. You know,
yeah.
with that Ravens linebacking core being able to potentially keep up, or you know, if they drop down a safety to cover Gibbs, which is probably the likely thing. You know, Kyle Hamilton's having a very strong season. Needs to clean up the dirty hits though.
Cheap shots. That was kind of psycho of him.
That was really bad on Sunday. But I think that there's a chance that, again, even if Gibbs gets the role that all of his investors have been hoping for, that it doesn't end up with a ton of returns. Anything? General comments on how this Ravens offense will function against the overachieving Lions defense?
Yeah, it's tough for me. I am not at the moment convinced Monken is as good of an offensive coordinator as Aaron Glenn is a defensive coordinator. So, you know, even that Browns game where Lamar did so good and the Ravens did so good, that was as close to a kind of like Brock Purdy, Jared Goff setup that Lamar will ever see in a game. He only had to throw it 19 times. The Browns were just kind of, you know, giving up short fields, screwing up on offense. So it's a good thing. It's a good indicator for the Ravens offense that they did as well as they did against the Browns, but I'm not at all convinced they could do it a second or third time if they played them two more times. And aside from that, everything's been kind of a slog with the Ravens. Lamar's completion percentage is way up, but they're just grinding out everything. It's like, why is it so hard to get a big play? No one but Lamar Jackson is giving them a big play. Why can't we get Keaton Mitchell on the field? Anyway, I think it's hard for me to see, sort of like Mark Andrews having one of his big games, which, you know, he's kind of due. He doesn't stay down forever. Short of another Andrews blow up, it's like, where's the yardage going to come from this receiving group? I don't see it. And I know that Flowers is getting a lot of usage, but they need more people to step up, and they can't bank on Flowers ever carrying the passing game the way Andrews has over the past couple of years, in my opinion. So I'm skeptical. I never want to bet against Lamar. Don't want to bet against Lamar at home when he's playing Jared Goff. But that offensive line advantage in Detroit is just so massive relative to what Lamar is going to deal with. And it's like, I think Lamar probably grinds it out a little bit, but I don't know if the points are going to be there.
Yeah, the big discussion point on Ravens Twitter this week has been the really stark contrast between their first half efficiency and their second half efficiency, and there are a lot of
how does that go?
Well, they start hot and then they just kind of sit
I
in the
mean, where
second
would you
half.
say they're? What are they failing to do, or what are they changing something?
Well, it doesn't seem like that. I mean, the players were all saying that basically, like, we need to just keep our foot on the gas and not let up. But I do wonder if teams are having an easy time adjusting to Monken's offense at halftime.
Yeah, I didn't pay close enough attention to notice what they do differently in the second half. But if it's an issue of doing the same thing as the first and not getting as good of results, then yeah, they need to adjust. If it's them doing a self-inflicted thing, then I guess that would be easy enough to clear up. But man, I really think they need to get Mitchell involved, man. They have no vertical explosiveness. Their only vertical explosiveness is Zay Flowers, and it's like he's better off in the slot being 5'9". Like you got to make the safeties turn around once in a while, you know?
Yeah, agreed. There needs to be more verticality there, and they're not even getting the most out of Jones in that, or Flowers. I'm sorry, in that facet of the game. So I'm expecting the Ravens to lose this one, but crazier things have happened. The Ravens do tend to be good at home, and Lamar does have a good record against NFC teams. But I think that one of those losses was against the Giants last year, so maybe that's relying too much on ancient history. Let's go to the game of the week, Mario. That's Raiders Bears. Raiders 3-point favorites in this one. Jimmy G banged up on the Raiders side of things, and Justin Fields very banged up on the Chicago side of this. So we're going to see some Tyson Bagent, secret Bagent man, in this one. First of all, Tyson Bagent got on my radar during I think the combine or maybe a Senior Bowl week where it was revealed that his dad was a world champion arm wrestler.
Okay.
And so I thought if nothing else, Bagent should be able to hang on to the ball. I think it was his first drop back last week that he fumbled. So that's out the window. And if you can't do that, then I'm out on this guy.
Yeah, I don't know much about him honestly, but just looking at his prospect profile at a glance, seems kind of like a throwaway prospect to me. Very much a practice squatter type. I don't know if a lot of other teams would have picked him to be a backup quarterback on their team. I think they would have tried to put him on the practice squad or have a veteran backup somebody. I think there's a lot of reason to expect Bagent to struggle if he had been playing for any team, short of just like a Detroit kind of setup where he has all day to throw. I think Bagent would struggle on any offense, and if it's the Bears that we're talking about, I mean, it wouldn't all be his fault, but it might get kind of comically bad. It might get memorably bad. And I even against a crap Raiders defense, I mean, it just doesn't matter. So I don't know who to pick with that said, no Jimmy G could make the Raiders quite bad. They're already a mess, as everyone knows, and Devontae Adams kind of grumbling vocally now. We'll see how awkward and painful it can get to be on a Josh McDaniels, Raiders team. And if it's such that it lets you lose to the Bears with Tyson Bagent, it's a pretty grim subject, John. It's all pretty bleak left and right. So I guess you like a player like Josh Jacobs, whoever's getting carries for the Bears. I'll assume it's Roschon Johnson. I'll assume also he's not going to do a whole lot, but it kind of sucks if so, because I can't even really criticize Roschon Johnson for struggling in a game where Tyson Bagent is his quarterback. So could be pretty awful on both sides, but I guess I would lean Raiders just because I would easily pick Hoyer over Bagent. I'd easily take McConnell over Bagent, etc.
Yeah, I would too. I think the Raiders get this done. The over-under is 37.5. So it looks not too dissimilar, Mario, from a game that would be happening in your backyard with Wisconsin, Iowa this past weekend. Like that's the kind of ugliness that we're expecting in this
Iowa.
one.
That's exactly what it's like. Iowa football offense. Yep.
But I think I'll take the Raiders here. I think that, we have a chance to see like a defensive player almost like single-handedly win a game. Like I think Max Crosby might
my God.
like just have like the single most like defensively impactful game as an edge rusher since like Lawrence Taylor. Like this, it should be insane what he does on Sunday. And I think that alone is going to be enough to get it done. I guess the last question here for me, with the bleak outlook for the Chicago passing game, do you bench DJ Moore this week?
Not after that one season at Maryland, John.
Right answer. You never give up on him.
You can't do
Not even if CJ Brown's the quarterback.
The point you bench DJ Moore is not only when they go to a linebacker as the fourth quarterback. It's when they go to the second string linebacker as the fifth quarterback. That's when you bench him.
Right. So we're not quite there.
Got a ways
yet.
to go.
Yep. So still some time. Yeah. Do yourself a favor and look at some of the old DJ Moore Maryland box scores. They all looked pretty much like his game against Washington a couple weeks ago, where he has 9 catches for 180 yards. And then the next leading receiver for Maryland is like Tavon Jacobs, 3 catches for 21 yards. And that's pretty much how
More
that
of
went.
Here. Yeah.
Fun times that was. Moving on. I can't even call this one a palate cleanser, Mario. We got Browns going to Indianapolis as 2.5-point favorites. It doesn't look like Deshaun Watson's going to play this week. Doesn't seem like anytime soon, really. Can Cleveland get it done in this spot? Battle of the backup quarterbacks. Like, is this a spot where when Minshew is an underdog at home, maybe you consider him a little bit more? Or is this Browns defense just going to be good enough to kind of seal it in ugly fashion?
I was going to say, I still think this is true. I was going to say, though, PJ Walker did better than I expected him to last week. And I looked again at his numbers, like 18 of 34 for 192 and 2 interceptions. I was like, oh, I guess I didn't realize it was that bad. But then I remembered, oh, yes, PJ Walker is, though. So that still is better than I expected him to do.
Right.
However, it's not, clearing the bar of expectation for PJ Walker isn't enough to put a team in a realistic state to win a football game. So given that potential limitation at quarterback, by the way, I do think the UCLA guy is clearly better. I think that was just benching him for PJ Walker was kind of almost like a scapegoating move as much as it was like a strategic one, because it's like Stefanski made the move because he knew, like, conventional reasoning, they can't get mad at me if I use conventional, so-called responsible reasoning of go with the veteran over the rookie. He thought that, and he might have been right to assume that he bought himself a little bit of room by doing that kind of like good conventional management stuff. But PJ Walker is worse than Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and yeah, Gardner Minshew's a lot better than certainly Walker, maybe both of them, I guess, likely too. So substandard quarterback or not, Minshew is the best one in this game, and maybe by a good distance. So Browns defense being super legit, I don't know. Maybe this is another situation where they end up kind of like against the Ravens, where like maybe they would have got Minshew if he had to throw it 40 times, but maybe he's only going to need to throw it 27 times, and maybe half of those will be in the red zone or something. I don't know. So it's hard for me to see how the Browns get it done exactly. I don't want to assume a whole lot for the Colts, but I just think I think Stefanski's going to get safely outcoached by Steichen, and even as bad as Minshew is, it just cannot be as bad as Walker.
Yeah, I think Indianapolis will have the better quarterback play here. I guess based on what we saw last week, although I think San Francisco played into Cleveland's hands a little bit as well, but it's hard to see Cleveland win last week against the best team in the league and not think that they can go into Indianapolis and beat them with Gardner Minshew.
I mean, the 49ers lost to the Bears last year. I mean, I know it was a tsunami, but it's like that Kyle Shanahan getting PTSD from that is probably like the moment he decided to just get rid of Trey Lance, as if it was like he brought the storm upon them or whatever. There's weird cases of a lot of the times some of the worst teams in the leagues beating one of the best teams in the league going back a long time. Don't ask me why I know this, but I remember like one thing was is either the 95 or the 93 Cowboys lost to the Browns, and the Browns were one of the worst teams for like many decades back at the time. And Dallas, those 93 and 95 Dallas won the Super Bowl. So stuff like that happens. I think the Colts being a well-coached, I'm assuming they're a well-coached team playing at home, having the quarterback advantage. I think it's just there's a lot working against Cleveland,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. Them going into this game, sans Nick Chubb, sans Deshaun Watson, that's a brutal setup. Amari Cooper, I thought, looked like Superman last week. Like his ability to have a good game with PJ Walker stung.
He was awesome with Brissett last year too.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get better with worse quarterbacks than you had in Dallas and whatever, the Raiders, wherever they were?
I guess like maybe a competent quarterback sees the entire field, whereas a quarterback.
Oh yes, the Todd Bauman thing.
Right,
it's Todd Bauman chucking it at Randy Moss every play thing.
See, it makes sense to a degree. So maybe Cooper has another strong game here, but otherwise, I mean, you're starting forward almost out of necessity. Yeah, the corners are not great there in Indianapolis. Any thoughts on Jonathan Taylor this week? We saw him get 32 snaps, which was super encouraging last week, 13 touches, but not a ton of yardage off of that, just 40 combined yards on those 13 touches.
It got more difficult without Richardson. I mean, with Minshew in, part of the problem here is that the Browns defense just in general looks really good, but I think you can. It was last week actually. The Jags kind of showed us how it's done. You kind of just sit back, playing almost like a Brandon Staley kind of defense, where you have your corners just sit back like 8 yards, and you leave Minshew with basically nothing except checkdowns at that point, and like short checkdowns, because he can't really rip like a 5-yard curl even, it's like to make even like a throw on something of 7 or 8 yards of a curl sort of structure. That corner, you just sit them where that route would break a little bit back, and you just make it that as simple as like, if you throw further than 5 yards, we're just jumping on it, and we're going to bet that you can't throw much further than that. And with Minshew, it's true. It's like he can get it to a guy like Chark in Jacksonville if you're leaving that wide open, but if you just play too high against him and have your corners like 8 yards off the line, you give your defense the freedom to just play, like see ball, get ball, crash downward every play, and Minshew can't really do anything about it. So Taylor ends up catching some of that, fallout, the run game in general of the Colts will, and he can make a big play, but it's going to have to specifically be in the form of like, just like he breaks like one tackle, and then even though there's 3 or 4 guys ready to pounce on him, he barely runs away from them all. It's going to be a harrowing kind of escape scenario at best.
Yeah, so that's those who invested the early round pick on Taylor. It's we're gonna have to wait another week for the breakout. If you got him late in the summer in like the 4th or the 5th, I think you still probably are starting him, but your expectations are more like flex, I suppose, for this week. Let's hit Bills Patriots. Bills 8.5 or 9-point favorites, depending on where you look. They looked very sluggish last week against the Giants. Giants really shot themselves in the foot at the end of the first half there. That was bad.
Yes.
That game sucked. Like that game was you had the scary injury to Damian Harris, and then you have like that fight that breaks out near the goal line at one point. I mean, it's just like, what Bills, what are you doing? Like why are you playing with your food to this extent with the freaking New York Football Giants?
I don't know if they were playing with their food. Like maybe they kind of sleptwalked into the game, be it for London reasons or just kind of saying, "Oh, it's the stupid Giants. Who cares?" That stuff, I guess, can happen. But John, you were pretty low on the Bills too, so I'm not trying to like say this is my idea, but like part of why I was so concerned about the Bills offense, at least in their ability to take a step forward, is that it's just difficult to budget the Josh Allen expected game unless Stephon Diggs does 120 yards or more or something like that. And that can be done, especially when they get a favorable matchup like the Dolphins or whatever, someone who Diggs can beat up and down the field. Hey, it's Josh Allen time, get Diggs to 120 or 150 or something. the defense starts rolling everything his way. You get Gabe Davis going, somebody else does. Dawson Knox gets uncovered off the play action. That's one of our two of our 4 or 5 touchdowns. That stuff always is on the table when Diggs does that. But if he does even a little bit less, the whole thing can fall apart, because it just starts in the form of like you go a 3 and out here and there that you hadn't in the past couple games, because Diggs in those cases got the first down, more likely like 20 or 30 yards, something like that. And Josh Allen, once he gets the defense dislodged a little bit, he can get loose more as a runner too. Everything starts to look the way Josh Allen wants it to in those cases. But when it's a 3 and out instead, or it's Diggs goes into the second half with only 35 yards, he's probably doing it on something like 7 or 8 targets. And it's that those passes that don't land are just point blank where the whole offense just falls apart. It needs him to make those plays, or else everything else can't pick up the slack. And I think they make it harder on themselves than they need to by some structural choices they make. But if they keep putting Gabe Davis running routes that someone, who runs 0.2 of a second faster than the 40 should be running instead, if they keep giving him those, if they keep making Deontay Hardy just sit in the flats like he's some kind of a like they're going to do a flea flicker thing with him or something, like don't have Gabe Davis running 40 yards and have Deontay Hardy sitting next to Josh Allen and like almost in the pocket. Have Hardy run the route that Davis does. Have Davis run a slant, anything else. I don't care. And they make it so hard on themselves by insisting on running things that way. And I don't know whether this matchup is one of them that it's especially concerning for. It's the Patriots being so awful on offense, having so many injuries on defense. Maybe Diggs should be just fine here. I know J.C. Jackson has good splits in the past against him, but whatever. We'll see. We'll see about that patellar tendon tear. I doubt that J.C. Jackson has one of his vintage games against Diggs here, and anything short of that, I don't see how it could possibly save the Patriots.
No, I think the Patriots cap out at like 10 points here on offense. If they score more than that, it's likely off of a pick six or something like that. I just don't really envision that the Patriots being able to move the ball. And I think that this is like even though the spread is high, I think this is a good buy low opportunity on the Bills. I think there are a lot of reasons, and some of them will continue on the struggles from last week, but some of them can be explained away by coming back from London and probably just like overlooking the opponent a little bit. I don't think that happens here. I think that the Bills take care of business. Nick Whalen, our guy, had this really great stat from a couple weeks ago where it's like of Josh Allen's wins in the league, like 80% of them have come by 7 or more points. So like when they win,
that sounds right.
They tend to win big. Yeah.
That's why that makes sense to me too. About my crank theory about Diggs is because if he's going over 130, it's like they're firing. They're shooting down everything they want to. If Diggs falls below it, it's like nothing goes. It's either they don't go or they go crazy.
Yep, and I think that this, even against New England, you can slow things down. Like I think that they kind of go crazy here. I think that they're next in line to dunk on the Patriots, or what's left of them.
They've done it before.
Old Billy. Yeah, they sure have. I think they relish the opportunity to do it again. Speaking of the Giants, they're playing host to the Washington Commanders this weekend. Commanders 2.5-point favorites on the road. Commanders coming off of a nice little game against the Falcons this past weekend. The Giants, as we mentioned, less so. So your thoughts on this just rousing matchup between these two juggernauts of the NFC East?
Well, Giants injury report still pretty lively. Let's see. Still no Andrew Thomas, no John Jacob Jingleheimer, center guy,
Schmitz.
no Wan'Dale Robinson, no Evan Neal. So particularly with the Giants, we already saw them when they were more or less healthy. It went a little better, I guess you could say, than it went against the Bills, but it was still pretty bad. The Dallas game, that was about as bad as this last one. I thought Tyrod Taylor did an okay job. By the way, is there anything new on Jones? Is he just like out?
He was supposed to do a limited practice on Wednesday.
Okay, so well, I'm not actually saying Daniel Jones is definitely worse than Tyrod Taylor, but I do think they're about equally good. And I do think Taylor played better in that game than Jones has in most games this year. But we saw what it amounted to. It still didn't matter with everything so dysfunctional. And I don't know if Barkley can do as much carrying here for them. I mean, I guess the Washington defense has to be. I can't tell how good the Buffalo run defense specifically is without Matt Milano, and Washington,
Right.
I can't figure out at all. Nothing they ever do makes any sense to me, and I am always just surprised, somehow blindsided by something. Maybe I should assume Barkley has a better matchup here. I can't tell if that's the right assumption, but if it is, then that's one way for the Giants to have things turn a little bit for the better. But generally, it's hard to get past the question of like, what are they going to do about this Washington defensive line? And I just don't know what this Giants pass blocking can do. I mean, you got Justin Pugh, like a fifth string tackle at left tackle. Is like, how are you going to deal with Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen? It's a lot, even if Washington is kind of stupid and mismanaged, which they are. It's just that's such a one-on-one thing. It's so difficult to screw up if you're Washington.
Yeah, I think so too. I like Washington in this spot. Let's. I think the crux of the matter for fantasy has been the Washington passing game and the target distribution specifically. There's a clip going around on Twitter this morning of Jahan Dotson like holding extra points. He sees 4.8% of the targets last week. Pretty much everything went to McLaurin or Curtis Samuel. I am kind of hat in hand going back to Curtis Samuel. I had given up, but he's looked pretty good this year, in my opinion.
He's good.
Yeah, definitely. So I had just kind of lost the faith, but seems like if Washington's figured one thing out on offense, it's to get a little bit of something out of him. And McLaurin, I think, that was an obvious, easy fix for Washington after underutilizing him in that game against Chicago. So I think that he continues to, be a huge presence in that passing game. But what do you do with Dotson at this point?
I would really try to bench him if possible. If you don't have anyone obviously better, don't go like, I don't know what the alternative. Don't go starting, in my opinion, like Darius Slayton over him or anybody like that. I know that Slayton has literally been better to this point. It's just I can't bet on that being the case indefinitely going forward. And Dotson is still good. So the issue is, especially if last week is any indication, Sam Howell might be the kind of quarterback who can only do like half field reads or something like that. Like maybe he just can't get to 4. Maybe it's like he can just in the nick of time get through 3. But if he has to go 1, 2, 3 to his right and then look back to his left, it's like he's just gonna black out, do something wacky. So it might have been that he can go, a flow chart of McLaurin, Samuel, and maybe it would make enough sense to me that McLaurin, even if he's kind of getting telegraphed looks, can still be so just strong with his own reps that he kind of grinds it out anyway. And Curtis Samuel too. I mean, he is a good player. I think he can do a lot more downfield than Washington asks him to, but working in the slot, getting these kind of like check down looks from Howell, that's why he's getting all these targets. It's specifically Howell's failure to get to Dotson that's causing Dotson's issues. So granted, if McLaurin and Samuel are both healthy, I don't have an obvious theory for how Dotson gets going, short of he faces a corner who's just so incredibly bad, even Howell sees it from a mile away, or the Washington offense deliberately putting Dotson as the early read over McLaurin. It's like they in general wouldn't want to do that, but if defenses are really rolling a ton of help to McLaurin, maybe they do want to do specifically that and be more like Shanahan, like remember what you did last week and set up the defense for a trap basically, and set up that trap by freeing up Dotson in an unexpected way. That kind of stuff should work. I just don't know if it's too generous to assume that Washington does it, or like too generous to assume Howell can even do that much.
Right. It's frustrating when it comes to Dotson. There was a point in time late in draft season where I imagine both of us saw this at some point with the amount of drafts we do. Dotson was going over McLaurin for a brief window in August after McLaurin picked up that toe injury late in the preseason. Boy, that's looking pretty tough. And I remember being in a salary cap draft right around that time and in that particular window where I think Dotson went for more than McLaurin in that auction. I ended up with McLaurin, and I'm glad I dodged that bullet. That team is doing horrible otherwise, though. I mean, it's got Nick Chubb and Josh Dobbs. So
I have one of those. But yeah, it's looking tough for Dotson. I don't know how it changes, but one thing, I guess the only thing I have to cling to at this point is I don't believe his numbers. Like I just don't. I am blaming Howell. I don't need to think about it.
Yep. Fair enough. It hurts my heart, but it's hard to disagree with you at this stage. Before we get to our next game, got a question from our guy Anfro. Pick two of these. This is the waiver wire superstars edition. So we've got to pick two out of the following: Deontay Foreman. I'm assuming that's Cortland Sutton, Zach Evans, and Latavius Murray.
Well, if Roschon Johnson continues to miss practice, if it looks like Roschon's going to be out, then I guess Foreman, Sutton for me. Otherwise, I'd probably be leaning Sutton Evans if Roschon Johnson is back. What are you thinking, John?
I'm lightly interested in Latavius Murray actually this week. Right. I think that we're going to see some short fields for Buffalo. Basically, my theory behind Damian Harris actually applied to Latavius Murray, it turns out, because James Cook, fine in certain functions, but moving the pile, picking up short yardage, that's not his game. Latavius Murray seems to have that. Obviously, with Harris getting hurt last week, that even more so, which is why Latavius Murray is on this radar here. So I do like Latavius Murray. Beyond
how many
that,
snaps did he? Sorry, I guess I should look a little closer at Murray's last usage before I leave it. So he had 12 carries on 28 snaps. I guess the one thing is, if there's any more reporting to be found on the whole Evans situation too, I'm a little worried about the Rams using Gaskin. But if there's reporting from a reliable reporter that the Rams are really going to roll with Evans as the starter, I personally would probably go with Evans. But there's probably like a higher floor with Murray.
All right, let's put a pin in that, because that's a huge storyline that we'll get to actually in our next game. But so messing around with the order a little bit to get to that Rams backfield, because that's a huge storyline for this week. But my bottom line here is Latavius Murray and Cortland Sutton, barring any change in reporting in regards to Zach Evans. So let's go ahead and zip over to that Rams-Steelers game. Initially, I was completely on board with what you're saying about Zach Evans, but I'm totally creeped out by the just flurry of moves that the Rams have made in terms of the backfield. Like getting your guy Royce Freeman. I'm surprised you didn't mention him first. I mean, the odds on Royce Freeman being mentioned in this podcast and me mentioning him first had to be astronomical. So I can't believe that happened
shortly before Halloween. Yes, but I have no idea what's going on there. I do still think Royce Freeman could have. I don't know. Like if you'd ask me how bad Royce Freeman could be at the absolute worst that I'm willing to conceive, I still think he's better than Brian Robinson, but that's just like an example of a case study of, in that case, even if that's true, it's just like, this is a case study of how a running back can just be washed aside by circumstance, and how easily they can be replaced if they don't have, if they don't get going in some notable way. But Royce Freeman, unless he had some injury that I missed all this time, he's still an objectively very athletic running back. It's like he hasn't been explosive in the NFL. It seems like he specifically maybe lacks acceleration, or I don't know if he got too used to getting big running lanes at Oregon and he's like indecisive behind the blockers. I don't know what exactly his issue is, but Royce Freeman is an athletic guy, and he ran, miles and miles at Oregon. So it's difficult for me to count him out when we're talking about such a ragtag bunch as this. And even if he's been, dead and gone for so long, it's like, are you really certain that Zach Evans, 6th-round pick from TCU, Mississippi, who rotated, was lesser than a very talented freshman, but he still played behind a freshman when he was at Mississippi, never took up a workhorse role for more than like 1 or 2 weeks at a time. However, if there is some sourced report, like, I don't know, some some big enough reporter to Jay Glazer, ideally, if he was just like, yeah, they're gonna feed Zach Evans, that would be like, okay, I guess they're gonna actually give Zach Evans the ball. And if we had assurance that they'd give Zach Evans the ball, I wouldn't exactly want to bet against him. I mean, he's a weird prospect, but he can probably run. If he has an issue, it would probably be maybe two issues. He might not be able to run that much because he's only about 200 pounds and he's kind of skinny. He's any problem that James Cook has with his workload limitations would certainly apply to Evans. But then Evans doesn't really catch passes either, or at least he hasn't done it yet. So there is a lot of risk there with Evans. But if someone can say reliably that he gets 30 plus snaps, then as we've seen with Kyren Williams, or in my opinion, as Kyren Williams' production has shown, pretty much anyone can run in this offense right now, or at least like it against the teams like the Cardinals, Evans could have done pretty much what Williams did, in my opinion. But if Williams is, or sorry, if Freeman's taking 20 snaps and Myles Gaskin's taking 20 snaps, then Evans isn't going to do a whole lot. So going back to Murray is probably safer than Evans. It's just you need that report on Evans to go with him. And I know that some people just have bad injury situations. Certainly, I'm pretty much in this boat in one league. Not that I have Evans in it, but if I had Evans, I might have to start him because it's like him or Algier or something. I'm still probably leaning Algier, but anyway, the backfield is confusing, and I was a little surprised to see how much Evans was going for in Fab.
Yeah, I saw him go for about half of a budget.
Oh my God. So, but with that said, John, I kind of have to embarrassingly disclose this. I thought someone would be putting about the same amount on Myles Gaskin because last week, you might recall, John, this is one of my Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins teams, of course. I assumed, oh, well, there's all this hype around Amari DiMercato. Surely I can get Keontae Ingram for just like 12% of my budget or whatever. And someone bid like 23%. So this week, John, having missed out on Keontae Ingram and whatever other nonsense in the past few weeks and really needing a running back for that entire time, I decided I better put 30% on Myles Gaskin because I thought Zach Evans would go for like 35. And I thought, well, people will know that Zach Evans has no passing down history and that Myles Gaskin specifically does. So I thought, just as everyone paid more for DiMercato last week, I thought Myles Gaskin would go for something like, I thought if you had made me guess, I would have said 21%, but I bid 30 because it was running to the point where it's like, where am I even going to spend my fab on by the year end? I missed out on Ingram of all people. The next highest bid, John, was like $3.
No,
that's 3%. So I maintain that those guys just should have bid more than they did. But like, for instance, Chris Brooks went for like 70 last week, not 70%, 7%, twice as many percentage points as Gaskin's second highest bid, behind my 30%. So I almost want to start him just out of like belligerent, just like protest of everyone else not bidding enough, but that would probably be misguided.
It's so weird. So I didn't end up with any Evans. But I don't think that really influences my take here. It's just if Evans hadn't gotten on the field yet with all of what's been going on to the point where Kyren Williams just has like a monopoly on this backfield. That plus them adding Gaskin and Royce Freeman, it's enough for me to be scared off of Zach Evans. Even as like a rental spot start, and obviously a week where everyone is kind of jammed up, guys like Joe Mixon aren't going to be available because they're on bye, everything like that. It's boring to say this, but I think, and I fear that there's just going to be no right answer when it comes to this chase.
That was Arizona
So I think something similar could formulate here. So like it's spooky season. The film It Follows. the Cardinals have given the Rams their backfield problems, and it gives us all a big headache in the fantasy community. On the Pittsburgh side, they come into this one off the bye. They won a game against Baltimore right before then. Your thoughts on how they project in this spot going out to LA?
Well, Tomlin off the bye versus McVay seems kind of like a big showdown to me. Tomlin just it's I'm sure some of it is like will and getting guys just motored up to play crazy all the time. I'm sure that's part of Tomlin's success, but he has to have a good, general week to week game planning sensibility about him. Like he must have good intel, must have good broad conceptual ideas about how to approach the game to have the kind of success that he's had. So particularly with the bye, it wouldn't be terribly shocking to me if Tomlin and the Steelers defense kind of did better than we expect them to against, this generally bad Steelers defense against this generally good looking Rams offense, especially now that Cooper Kupp is back. I can imagine Tomlin stalling them a little bit, but in the end, the Pickett factor, and I think Raheem Morris is doing a good job with the Rams defense. Their corner being out, Darian Kendrick being out, I don't think that's going to matter a whole lot. That guy runs like a 4.75 or something, and
not a good NFL player. Great Georgia Bulldog though. Orange Bowl defensive player of the game.
Yes, and he's had a good run with the Rams here, but yeah, it seems like the system is what's making the corner results good for the Rams, and I don't think his absence matters a whole lot. So, Aaron Donald versus Kenny Pickett, that's almost like a plus EPA for the Rams right there.
Yeah, that the Steelers offensive line did not make the strides that many expected coming into the season. Myself
revenge narrative, Pittsburgh University.
Oh my gosh, that's right. They slept on him. Maybe, I don't know. The Steelers at that time were probably picking way into the 20s, whereas the Rams were 14th or something. But far be it from me to assume that Aaron Donald can't get himself fired up for it. Regardless, especially as a revenge game narrative appreciator such as myself. But yeah, give me the Rams in this spot as 3-point favorites. Going back to the 1 o'clock window briefly, Bucks Falcons. Bucks 2.5-point favorites here.
Yeah, I would take the Buccaneers. Really disappointing how much Mike Evans has struggled to hold on to the ball this year. He's getting open kind of just fine and still just blowing it when the ball gets there. It's bizarre to watch. I don't know how the Buccaneers move the ball exactly. Their run game is not encouraging. It's
non-existent.
Yeah, it's a little difficult for me to see how they budget production aside from Chris Godwin in this game. Like Chris Godwin should, especially if they move him more into the slot, he should have a good game here as long as he stays away from AJ Terrell. But yeah, it's not that easy to see how they move the ball. Maybe I should have given the Falcons more consideration because they can run a little bit. It's just they have to run more specifically, and we've seen plenty of times this year where they couldn't do it. So I'll go with the Buccaneers, but it's kind of like I'm just deferring to general pessimism about like Desmond Ridder,
Yeah, Ridder 2 weeks ago against the Texans looked some version of competent, and it made people put away their Taylor Heineke signals. Mine's still out.
I was gonna say, not me, John, not me.
No, not us, man. We're Taylor Heineke guys all the way. But my general sense on the Bucs this year is they can beat teams that are equal or lesser than them, but they're not going to beat I think we've seen it in their losses against two of the better teams in the NFC, the Eagles and the Lions, where it's like they don't quite have enough to hang with those types. Yeah. But the Falcons fall into the first bucket, and therefore I do like the Buccaneers in this spot. Let's keep rolling. And then stray comment from me. Remember when people were trying to hype themselves up about Sean Tucker? That was funny.
I'd like to see him get more of a shot, but yeah, I mean it's bleak there. They're all pretty crap.
The Buccaneers. It's weird how a team and a franchise can have a general trend the way that the Buccaneers have, where basically since they won their first Super Bowl back in 2002, they are like by far the worst rushing team in the NFL. Like over several iterations of coaches and offenses and everything like that. That just the recurring theme for the Buccaneers. They're not going to run the ball on you. Let's keep going here. We got the Cardinals and the Seahawks. Seahawks 7.5-point favorites at home in this one. Considering using the Seahawks in Survivor this week, my Survivor co-manager, also a RotoWire guy, Chris Owen, he lives in Seattle, considering going to the game to add the correct vibes to make sure that survivor pick comes in. But beyond that, I thought Seattle looked great on that opening drive last week, and then they just kind of didn't do anything the rest of the way. It felt like they had the ball the entirety of the fourth quarter and like in scoring territory, and yet they just every time it was just Geno just getting swarmed by like 7 Bengals.
Yeah, that's always an agonizing situation where the offense just has the ball forever. It's like you're trapped in a fever dream about football or something. But I think the story with that game to me is that over the course of the game in particular, Lou Anarumo just started stacking W's basically. Like he just started, they came out with the first drive, the Seahawks, their talent shone through because they kind of had a element of surprise to their game plan. The receiver, the running back talent that they have, Geno Smith, it was manifesting at that point. But then Lou Anarumo started to kind of figure things out and add stressors that the Seahawks weren't subjected to in the first drive, and the Seahawks couldn't counter adjust. Or so that's kind of how I'm seeing it. So I have a little bit of a fear of the Seahawks offensive coaching getting kind of out coached by the defensive component in a lot of games. However, this probably isn't one of them. I think the Cardinals are just at too profound of a talent disadvantage on defense. Having one of the most bare bones corner rotations I've ever seen, having to deal with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, that's just a tough spot. And short of, I guess, like Zaven Collins taking the game over, I just don't know how the Cardinals do a whole lot to stress the Seahawks offense. But the Cardinals have overachieved on either side of the ball plenty of times already this year.
They have. I'm wondering if it's kind of running out, like the Josh Dobbs portion of the season, where the Cardinals have been. I've used this word a million times to describe them. Like they've been plucky through this first opening stanza of the season, but I think we're with Kyler Murray getting back on the practice field Wednesday, like I think we see Dobbs 1, maybe 2 more times, and I think that all the smoke and mirrors that they needed to have to be plucky in the first place early in the season, I think that's basically run its course, and I do believe that the Seahawks will be able to take care of business here. I do have one question for you based off of your tweeting earlier this week as it pertains to one Jackson Smith in Jigba. So people are getting a little antsy about the lack of production there, and understandably so. Do you see any signs of a turnaround for him this year?
I don't see the signs specifically, but it could be one of those cases where you can be reasonably optimistic that the signs will show up, just in not the most obvious expected way at the current time. What I mean by that is because of how young he is and because of how he produced in college and also because of how he athletically tested. I mean, I always thought, though, Smith and Jigba was not a realistic outside or downfield receiver. I thought the 3-cone time, his build, certainly the production at Ohio State, it was enough to believe he could be a really good slot receiver in the NFL. And they've been mostly playing him in the slot, and it hasn't happened. He doesn't turn 22 until mid-February, so he's at an underclassman age. Sometimes guys like that take a while to really get going. I think he'll get going, but it's like he's been just completely awful to this point in a way that he almost would have to be better in the future sample. It's like it's difficult to be as bad twice in a row as he has been over his first 170 snaps. 16 catches for 110 yards on 25 targets. The average depth of target at 3.8. That needs to go up. Even if his catch rate raises from 64 to like 70, an average depth of target of 3.8 means you're not getting open on any of your routes. We are only running screens and just like we're like throwing quick looks against big cushions against you. That's it. That's the only way you're getting the ball. And that has to go up. I mean that both. They need to do it to fix it, and it's almost a struggle to keep your average depth of target that low, so it almost has to go up. But it's not a good start. And, as a prospect, I compared Jackson Smith and Jigba to Amon-Ra St. Brown, basically the thinking being, only a slot receiver, but a very good one. and a player who can't threaten more than 10 yards downfield, but can get you 100 catches a year at a plus efficiency, something like that. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, his rookie year, would not have failed this way, you know? So at the very least, I have to readjust the expectation to something less than Amon-Ra St. Brown at his best. And I don't know what that looks like at that point. It's as a slot receiver, to be worth it, to be considered like a star receiver as a slot specialist, you need to be about as good or better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. You know, it's too replaceable of a function.
Jackson Sloth in Jigba, folks.
Why did I take? I should have just said that.
That's all we need. Shout out to the chat. Let's go Packers Broncos. I don't want to spend a time on this. You don't want to spend a ton of time on this. The listeners don't want it. Packers off the bye, looking bad. The Broncos looking worse, even still. Yeah. What's your read here?
Well, I'd have to take the Packers, I suppose, but I don't really know why. It's just the Broncos seem doomed to a thing where if Russell Wilson throws the ball more than like 30 times, they start to fall apart. And is Jerry Jeudy going to be allowed to play in this game? Like, what's going on? Are they still doing some kind of?
I don't know. I think he might still be on the injury report from what Steve Smith did to him last week.
Yes, he is. So the Broncos have some players who should do something. It's just like no one's doing quite what they're supposed to, and the issue of like Sean Payton's illegitimacy, you know, it seems like there's almost like a mutiny ready to go against him, and the only reason maybe it hasn't is because enough people also hate Russell Wilson on the team that they haven't realized that they also hate Sean Payton enough to take that kind of measures. I don't know, but it seems like the Packers are at least running practices and are trying to win, whereas the Broncos just seem like a bunch of people who suck at their jobs and hate each other.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll go with the Packers.
Yeah, I'll go Packers here as well. It's that's going to be one of those games that if you're watching Red Zone on Sunday, they only show it when everything else is at halftime or commercial break, basically. Even though there's only there's 3 other games going on in that window. So yeah, there's no need for Red Zone to be showing that one really at all. Chargers Chiefs 5.5-point favorites. Chargers. A lot of takes about the Chargers coming out of the Monday night game. A lot of referenda. I don't know. I forget what the plural is for that. On Justin Herbert, is he actually good? What's going on there? But they do always play the Chiefs tough. So I'm a overall skeptic of this Chargers team, not of Herbert in particular, but of the team. And I still think that they can cover 5.5 against a Chiefs team that just, it's still good. It's still going to win the game, but it hasn't hit its full stride yet.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs got Mecole Hardman back, so actually they're going to cover by 10 points. But, I mean, it is kind of funny. The Chiefs have needed a Mecole Hardman all year. It's funny to see how Marquez Valdes-Scantling's one downfield trick has fallen flat. You know, it's like defenses know, just put a safety over the top. They're not going to go to him. They can't. And their complaint with Hardman was like, oh, he doesn't offer enough dimensions. He's just like a screen pass and a fly route guy. It's like, well, I bet you wish you could throw Marquez Valdes-Scantling some screens right now. You can't even do that with him. So I do think Hardman helps the Chiefs offense in a meaningful way. Like, I don't even mean like, oh, the floor is so low, he's got to be better. I think there's a structural benefit to having a credible downfield, an explosiveness threat that a safety has to think about. And Valdes-Scantling's one dimension is, again, fallen so flat that it's like that one dimension isn't even expressing anymore. So I think they need some downfield. They need to introduce to the defense some downfield concern. And I think Hardman can meaningfully help them there, though mostly in the form of getting more cover for Kelsey and Rashee Rice, ideally. So the more that the Chiefs get Rashee Rice going, you know, keep just feed him, just see how far it can go, because the answer, I think, might surprise them. You know, it's like you might be surprised how much you can get out of Rashee Rice before the defense has to adjust to it. And then guess what? Travis Kelce is going to be wide open. So they got to get that going. And once they do, I think they can get into kind of like a shootout mode again, certainly matching or exceeding whatever the Chargers could present. But yeah, in the case of Herbert, I think he's clearly great quarterback. I think part of the reason there's so much skirmishing over quarterback rankings nowadays is because it's just kind of funny how unmatched Patrick Mahomes is. It's like there's that kind of push a year or two ago where people are like, Josh Allen might be better, Joe Burrow might be better. And it was always ridiculous, but recent events have shown it to be particularly silly. And it's like since the group behind Mahomes is so far away, and since it's comprised of Burrow, Herbert, whatever, Lamar, Allen, it's like all those guys screw up way more often than Mahomes does, and so there's always like this need to kind of like direct the ire of the shifting rankings causing us cognitive dissonance with our priors. It's like these guys, hyperbole comes out, and in Herbert's case, like, look, let's chill out. The guy went over 30 plus touchdowns in both of his first 2 seasons in the NFL, and not because it was a particularly great offense. I mean, it was a good offense, but getting those kinds of results out of rookies, and particularly taking on the volume as a passer that he did. I mean, they'd throw 40 times a game with him over and over and over. He carried the offense and he could do it. Then Brandon Staley showed there. And after that first year with Staley there, it seems like there's been some kind of adjustments to that game that they've been playing ever since, where it's just everybody's running like 8-yard ins, except Keenan Allen. He's kind of doing something down the seam. Everybody else is running curls and ins. 8 yards. No need for more than that. We can get that 3rd and 1 after Josh Palmer gets us there. And that's just how you should run an offense, apparently. And Staley's the common thread in all these cases. Even with Kellen Moore there, the offense still looks the same to me. So
it does.
Yeah, I think the structure is the problem, but the structure will persist until Staley is gone. So it's easy for me to take the Chiefs here.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And then
cover
yeah, I mean, I get it. I definitely get it. And then saw Quentin Johnston get dropped in a lot of leagues this week.
Makes sense. He's not featured in the offense. It is one thing to point out it's generally concerning how it has gone for him. Certainly true. It's another to say like, oh, therefore he's bad, particularly when how much would we mean that statement if he had simply gotten an on-target pass when he had beat Jordan Lewis or something, running looked like a corner route from the slot, and Herbert got hit as he threw it and the ball fell flat, but you saw Johnston was open, like if he can get open on that play, why can't we arrange it a second time all year? And I think the answer to that question is in the personnel usage of the Chargers offense. It's like the answer to why we can't get Johnston on that look a second time all year, let alone in a single game, even though it was probably there and even though nothing else was working, is because, well, we can't run that play. We got to get Stone Smart and Trey McKitty on the field. They got to get their reps. And so you can't get Johnston the ball because of your own personnel choice for these other patently awful players. It casts the judgment of the people calling the shots into such doubt, in my opinion, that you have to just put an asterisk by the numbers for now, accepting that he's a disappointment of some form, even in the long term, accepting something to the effect of like, well, Rashee Rice is clearly the better player, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, clearly better players, but the rush to kind of like completely cross him off for the long term is strange to me. With that said, the short term, Staley's still the coach.
Yep. So it's hard to see it getting a whole lot better. Like we've had enough time from the Mike Williams injury for this role to work out, and they had the bye in week 5, and there's still really nothing there for Johnston, unfortunately. So there's a 7th, 8th round pick in your fantasy drafts down the drain. Let's go ahead and hit these 2 primetime games quickly. We've got Dolphins, Eagles on paper, one of the best games we're going to get this season. I'm glad that it's on national TV as opposed to having to watch the Giants again. We've got the Eagles coming off their first loss of the season in surprising fashion against the Jets, and the Dolphins. Well, they went down 14 points against the Panthers and then outscored the Panthers 42-7. The 7 points that the Panthers scored were also directly from the Dolphins. So the Dolphins scored the remaining 49 points for you in that one. So that offense is still going nuts. We did get a question about Julio earlier in this chat. Your read on this game with the Eagles checking in as 2.5-point favorites?
It's probably the best matchup of, or maybe not the year, maybe that's hyperbole, but in a long time it's been since we had one that looks this good on paper. And it seems to me that both sides should be able to threaten the other, with the other, not having a whole lot of recourse otherwise. Like, I don't really know, even from the Eagle side, their defense is legitimately good. The Dolphins one is just kind of whatever, not that great. They have some moxie or whatever, but not a whole lot going for them generally. The Eagles are legitimately good, and yet the Dolphins matchup to them might be so unfavorable that the Eagles look more like a mediocre defense in this game. So if the Dolphins can kind of race faster than the Eagles, which is something that's possible, I think we're seeing there are limitations to the amount of slack Jalen Hurts can carry. And the answer is some form of a lot, of course, but it's like they're putting absolutely everything on him when the running game dies at all. Even Swift wasn't getting anything going last week. And it's like they continue to just waste reps with Kenneth Gainwell, like 3.4 yards per carry behind that offensive line. Are you crazy? What are you doing? Like, get the hint already. Give the ball to anyone else. I would say Rashad Penny, sure, but figure it out. And also recall that this is the player you thought would be your starter, and consider what else you might be wrong about, i.e. Penny. So they could improve things by just getting the running game going more. But if they don't, and if Tua is not hindered by the Philadelphia defense, this could be a stressful spot for Hurts. The matchup is fine because those receivers can dust those corners all day, but Hurts is going to have to gun it out, and whether he can, I think, is kind of like a measure of a slight, a good data point on whether the Eagles can actually see it through to the Super Bowl level.
I'm on the Dolphins here. I like them in this spot. Lane Johnson being banged up, missing practice on Wednesday. That takes
big.
some of the effectiveness out of that Philly offensive line. And I just wonder what happens to Philly when they have to play from behind. And because they've been in the comfortable setups, save for last week, of course, where they couldn't get anything going on offense. But the defense being able to kind of put the offense in favorable spots all the time. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. And if there is a weak point on the Eagles defense, it is in the secondary. You got to deal with that track team with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And then, of course, Raheem Mostert when he hits the open field. So I think there's
20 touchdown Raheem Mostert. What a world.
Insane. I love it. This is a world that I like, as opposed to like the Jamal Williams leading the league in rushing touchdowns.
Absolutely.
Much more aesthetically pleasing with Mostert. Give me the Fins here. I think they go up and make a bit of a statement there in Philadelphia to
take the over, though.
Yes, and the over is high.
Whatever it is, don't care.
Just keep it rocking. It's up to 52 at DraftKings. And then we'll round it out here. Vikings playing host to the 49ers. Niners obviously also coming off their first loss of the season. Christian McCaffrey, his status up in the air. So that is, forced to a similar extent of what we saw with the Rams and waiver wire pickups in fantasy this week. The Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell debate rages. But it might be moot.
They're both good players, in my opinion. With Mason, you can play a more rugged game. You can send him into the teeth of the defense, and he'll just go, he'll always run like his hair's on fire, especially when they keep him off the bench like this. He can allocate his energy that way. Mitchell is more capable when healthy from scrimmage, but we have, I think, reason to worry about his health, and you can't give him those like human shield plays anymore like you can with Jordan Mason. And in this offense, the human shield carries can still be productive. So either way, whatever, the Vikings are getting, I think, torched here. I know these are like the predictions I'm most wrong about traditionally, but the Vikings versus the 49ers to me is a complete joke. I think the Vikings have layers of dysfunction that aren't always apparent due to like the relatively easy matchups that they've seen at sometimes. But without Justin Jefferson, this offense cannot go. And if you're playing the 49ers with an offense that cannot go, how are you even going to score 7 points, let alone cover it?
Yeah. I'm not seeing it there on the Vikings side of things. Then you toss in primetime Kirk. I mean, it's all working against the Vikings in this setup, kind of regardless of whether McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel.
They might not get 180 yards. They might finish the game with fewer than 200 yards on offense.
For their game to be as ugly as it was against Chicago last week, that just bodes so ill for them going into a game against, probably the best defense in football in the 49ers. So I like the Niners in this spot a fair bit as well. Quick question before we get out of here, Mario. Mateo was wondering, could he start both the Falcons running backs this week, or would the Algier alternative be any of Pierce, Myles Gaskin, or I'm not sure which K. Williams that would be if it's not Kyron, who's obviously not
Sorry
playing.
that I need to ask this. Who is Pierce? Is this like Alec Pierce, the receiver?
What? Perhaps.
Who is? Okay, so if there's some report about like Myles Gaskin,
Pierce is on bye.
Yeah, so if Gaskin is confirmed like playing, and if we see a report that like, oh, he might get some of those passing down snaps, maybe him. But from that particular group, I don't know if you'll find someone better than Algier.
Yeah, I don't either, and we talked about it. Like, it's not a particularly rosy matchup for the Falcons, but even still, given those other options, it might just be best to hope and pray that the Falcons go with a service academy type offense, and just all of its snaps are carries to Bijan or Tyler Algier. Drew wants to know if he's crazy, probably. But aren't we all? Going with Rashee Rice over DJ Moore this week. I don't think it's that crazy.
It's not crazy, which it like grates on my soul to have that flicker of realization, because I'm so predisposed to just kind of like sticking with the DJ Moore option. But it's such a weird case with Tyson Bagent, and I just think, I don't know, Rashee Rice. I'm higher on Rashee Rice than most people, so. This is a question that's like designed to torment me. It's certainly not crazy. What I have more trouble with is this figuring out what I even think about it.
It's crazy that it's crazy. Very meta. But I would probably start with Rashee Rice.
Okay, now that's the permission I needed, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking at DJ Moore on my bench in some shallower leagues even. It's just I'm that out on Bagent being able to do anything. But that's gonna wrap it up for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, huge thanks to our commenters in the live chat. For those who watch us live on YouTube, of course, be sure to subscribe to RotoWire's YouTube channel. Let's see, basketball is getting ready to start, so we have a RotoWire basketball channel as well. Be sure you're into that, all the hoop heads out there. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Circa and Blue Wire. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/RotoWire